All right, so we are back again. We have Abe joining us once again for another video because everybody really seemed to love him, having him on for the last one.
Good to be back.
But we definitely wanted to talk more about our man Kuma, the saint of One Piece, the poor man. But chapter 1100 out now. A lot of anticipation. What didn't seem like a huge payoff, but one panel in particular definitely caught our eye, and that was Kuma already being right outside of Fuchsia Village when he gets the call from the world government.
Yeah, and that leads to a lot of questions and possibilities for why he was already there before the world government even told him that he needed to be. It could be that he was watching over Luffy as like a direct request or help for Dragon. He could just be trying to simply observe Luffy from afar with like his own interest.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely seems like he's on the island for him. It's not for anybody else. It wasn't for command or anything like that. My personal favorite is that he was going to meet Luffy because he was just interested in him as a person. You see him getting chased by the tiger in the chapter, so he's a pretty interesting kid. But later on, it seems like Luffy doesn't recognize Kuma, but this is the same dude who pushed out his own memories, so it's not outside of possibility for that to still be the case.
Yeah, and it's been pointed out by a lot of fans, especially prior to the Kuma flashback, that some of his actions seem to kind of be conflicting in like their motives or rationale. And starting with Thriller Bark, he was pushing the Strawhats to extreme limits, almost killing some of them. But then the very next arc at Sabaody, he basically saves their life and plays a crucial role in their training and taking the next step as a crew.
So, with those in mind, and then with what we know now, especially about who he really is and what he's about, we kind of wanted to propose and figure out what Kuma's personal motivation has been for overwatching the Straw Hats and how that motivation might actually play into what he's going to do at Egghead. And so, here's our theory in basis. Given that Kuma's completely obedient to the world government, because without that, Bonnie could be a slave again, as we just heard in chapter 1100. Perhaps that Kuma was completely obedient, except for with one crew in particular, that being the Straw Hats. And maybe it's not just because it's the Straw Hats, but maybe it's more the fact that Luffy, as we know now, is Sun God Nika, and Kuma, being a huge advocate of Nika, would probably stand by what he views as his god until he at least feels like the crew or other people are able to support him when he can't anymore.
Yeah, and looking back at the story, there's a lot of evidence that maybe not upon first read, but when going back, it really sticks out and shows that Kuma has always had a great interest in the Straw Hats, and specifically Luffy.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I said before, Thriller Bark is a huge piece because that's kind of the first time we see him. Even when he's first talking to Moria in chapter 474, which I love, he makes it clear. He's like, I was told to come here to warn you. That was my only command. I follow commands, but that was my only command. If I need to fight you, where do you want to go on vacation? Like, he was pretty dicey with his words. And then even after he was ordered to attack the crew, and we know what he did with all of that, he goes on to explain in chapter 485, he's like, oh, well, that's to be expected of Dragon's Son, that he has a crew that's super loyal like that and willing to stand up to their limit, which is a huge repeating phrase throughout the entirety of Thriller Bark, where he's like, is that your limit, Zoro? Is this the limit of Luffy's crew? Almost like he's testing them in a way, which kind of also makes sense. But he reveals immediately that he has prior knowledge to Dragon and Luffy's connection, which is something not even his right hand has.
Right, and for Ivankov, they'd already been arrested for a while, so that would explain maybe why Dragon hadn't let them know that he has a son. But also, there's the potential that Dragon opened up more to Kuma because of their shared parenthood.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Dragon's not the most present father, but he is still... He's looked out for him in, like, Lowtown. We can give him that win.
Oh, for sure.
But, I mean, that would make sense if... Even after Thriller Bark, he knows that the world government's probably watching him after he failed to carry that out. But he goes on to compromise his perfect record and go to Sabaody, disrupt Kizaru after he punched a celestial dragon. He's like, I still need to save them. I even if it hurts my perfect record, he went out of his way to put that on the line again for them.
Yeah. And, like, due to his prior fight with them and already knowing a lot of their backgrounds, strengths, weaknesses, he knew exactly what they all needed most out of their training. Mm-hmm. So for Sanji going to Ivankov, who obviously he has great history with, he knows that Ivankov can inspire life in Sanji, which is crucial for him later in the story with, you know, his family and all that. Then there's Chopper going to the island with all the medicine, with Arya for Nami and getting all of her new staff powers. And then especially Robin, ending up on an island that is just about to be liberated by the Revolutionary Army.
Which is even crazier because I'm not sure about the total number, but Tequila Wolf has existed for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Hundreds of years, and just like the week it was liberated, Robin happened to show up, so he had something in play here already.
He knew something. What does he know?
It makes sense. He's sending them all to his closest allies, and he's seemingly preserving this crew, and he goes even further to preserve their ship too, like you were about to mention.
Right. 2 years go by. They finally get back to Sabaody, and then the way Frankie puts it to them, his final wish was to protect the Sunny with his life. And I think, especially because Bonnie's now safe, and, you know, has her own crew, all that good stuff, really he can finally do he can finally support his own dream of helping Nika and trying to bring freedom to the world. And that comes right out of chapter 603, when they are finally, like, heading for Fishman Island.
Yeah, I mean, Frankie nails it pretty much on the head. He's talking about it. The man 2 years ago, the Shishibukai, Bartholomew Kuma, who tore us apart. He's the savior of our crew, essentially. We owe him our life. We wouldn't even have this chance. And that's something we want to come back around to at the end. But it's very encompassing, and it kind of summarizes a lot of what we're trying to say, that it seems like every act of defiance Kuma has made across the story was to further this effort with the Straw Hats, to further what we believe was his wish to support Nika, because it seems like he knew in some way before anybody else, before Oda revealed it to everybody else, he knew something. So our ultimate proposition is this: Kuma is a priest of the sun god Nika. He has read that Bible front to back, probably more than anyone else in the One Piece world. It would make sense if he knows, or like, the signs of Nika to come, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that also ties in to the idea that certain lineage factors could not be removed even when they completely wiped his personality and memory. There's just like that core sense of identity within him, which is something we see again in Egghead from Lilith. When she mentions the cyborg robot, like the shark still has a taste for blood, and Hancock Seraphim still has love for Luffy. It's the same idea that Kuma, even after having everything else taken away, still has that base desire to support Nika and the strive for freedom for all people.
Absolutely. I mean, it's probably the first thing he's done for himself in his whole life, which is insane to think about. But he spent his whole life fighting the revolution, fawning after and hoping for Jenny all those years, trying to find a cure for Bonnie. He has lived his whole life through other people, and maybe in his mind he knows, I have a few more months before I'm supposed to be gone. I'm gonna use this opportunity to really support something I've believed in this whole time, being Nika. And maybe if I do that, I don't even have to worry about Bonnie being a slave if I have these acts of defiance, because I'm bringing in that new era. That explains Thriller Bark, Sabaody, Return to Sabaody.
Everything.
It's him doing it for himself, and like you said, those parts of the lineage factor that can't be removed are just those core aspects of who these things are. If this is the base desire, the one thing he has done for himself in his whole life, that has to be such a strong desire for a character like him.
Exactly. Well, and even doing it for himself, it's still for other people. It's helping the Straw Hats, and with that end goal of, ending slavery, ending suffering, ending pain. So back to the present time, that could be perhaps his final act that we're about to witness on Egghead, as we believe, will be that he will either show up and remove all of Luffy's exhaustion so that he can fight Saturn, or maybe even himself take on Saturn and allow for the Straw Hats to escape and, for the final time, be their savior, be the reason they escape and have a chance to provide freedom to the world.
I can only imagine the emotional shift of the first time we saw him push the pain bubble out of Luffy, and this time, just how far that would be in the way we've seen this character. But you mentioned it perfectly. Once more, he is the savior of their character, and we wanted to end it on a quote that we felt perfectly encapsulated this whole concept. It's back to chapter 603, where Frankie's talking about the way in which he protected the Sunny throughout those 2 years, and what he says is, I don't see any way for us to find out what he was truly thinking at this point, but hold that knowledge in your hearts. When it comes down to it, Bartholomew Kuma is the savior of our crew, and if we ever do run into him again, it'll be as a heartless human weapon.
For them to then run into him when all hope seems lost, and to once again have him save them, that would be a beautiful end to one of the most painful stories I think I've ever heard in any story ever.
It's about time that Kuma gets something for himself.
The ultimate redemption arc.
But that's all we have for you guys today. We wanted to keep it a bit more brief than last time, a bit more focused than last time, but
Indeed.
we'll still be putting out some more content, keeping things more loose in the future. And we want to know what you guys think. If you guys think that this is how Kuma's gonna go out, or if there's still more for him. So let us know what you think. Make sure to like and subscribe, and come back for next time.